Hello everyone, welcome back down the fly. Today we're going to be bringing you part 5 of the NHL trade bait board. This will be the finale. If you haven't already, be sure to check out part 1 to 4. Link can be found in the description below. But with that, we'll jump right on into it today with number 10, Filip Forsberg. So taking a guy like Filip Forsberg playing for the Nashville Predators right now, valuing in at $6 million, and he's going to be UFA at the end of the year. We take a look at him. He is one of those players that unfortunately for him, he is in a sort of a predicament right now, especially with Nashville situation, where they're starting to sort of into a little bit of a rebuild, but not necessarily a full rebuild, and he's not necessarily going to be in that top line role that he's looking for come next year. And with the unrestricted free agency, he has expressed interest in moving to a different team. So I expect Nashville to be definitely shopping around this trade deadline for him. He is going to be quite a high to fetch prospect, and I think when you take a look at what he brings, he is going to be there, sort of there as like a upper first round pick into sort of a mid first. When you take a look at some of these contending teams, you look at sort of that first round area plus a prospect. But for Nashville, they're in a playoff spot right now, but at the same time, they do want to get some value out of one of their better players, and I think they can really fetch some value with a guy like Filip Forsberg, so I do expect him to be traded, but at the end of the day, who knows? I mean, they got quite this thing going on right now in Nashville, but at the same time, they do want some value for a guy they're going to let walk in free agency otherwise. But with that is going to be Filip Forsberg at number 10. Moving on to number 9, we have Claude Giroux, and this is sort of the predicament with Claude Giroux. $8.275 million going to be UFA at the end of the year. But here's the kicker: he does have a full no movement clause, which means he cannot be traded unless he would like to be traded. And I think when you take a look at the, sort of the legacy of Claude Giroux, he has been a flyer his whole life, and I think when you really start to take that into consideration, he doesn't want to move. He's their captain, but at the same time, there have been a lot of rumors, and I think at the end of the day, if he sees a fit where he wants to go, Philadelphia is going to make it happen. He is starting to get to the end of his career. He hasn't quite found the success of a Stanley Cup yet. So I'm looking forward to seeing if Giroux is going to basically waive his no movement clause, which I do expect to happen. He has been rumored quite heavily, and expect a contending team to go after him. The cap hit is a little high, but at the same time, I do expect the Flyers to retain some of that salary. They have cap space to work around. They're also going to be losing JBR, most likely as well. He was another player on the list from earlier. But I do expect a guy like Claude Giroux to be up there. Flyers are in basically no sense of a playoff spot. They will not unless major choke happens from either Washington or Boston. But with that, I do expect the Flyers to be an active team at this deadline, trading away the majority of their older guys. But with that, we do have Claude Giroux at number 9. Moving on to number 8 with Joe Pavelski. So Joe Pavelski is another one where we start to get into that no team trade clause, and for him, he has picked 3 teams that he can be traded to, and I am looking forward to seeing what those teams are, because taking a look at Joe Pavelski, he's another one that's starting to get to the end of his career, and with a team like Dallas, who is sort of in that middle role right now in terms of the Western Conference, they have a shot at the playoffs. But at the same time, Pavelski does want to win a cup. He is valuing in at $7 million, going to be a UFA at the end of the year. So I do expect him to be another rental. But Dallas does have the cap space to work around. So it is going to be interesting to see if they decide to sort of retain salary, get a little bit higher of a pick back. And I think when you take a look at a team like Dallas right now, they are sort of a team that can contend but won't contend, right? They're the team that's going to be there in the playoffs, probably a first round exit for most teams, but at the end of the day, I do expect Pavelski to be moved, and with that, he does come in at number 8. Moving on to number 7 with Brock Boeser, valuing it at $5.875, ending the season arbitration eligible RFA. So with Brock Boeser, the reason why I have him on this list, heavily rumored, but in terms of value, he should be lower. Probably in that 3 or 2 role, but at the same time, the likelihood of him being traded is a lot less, because Vancouver does have still rights to him at the end of the year. They can put him under their qualifying offer and then work with them throughout free agency, and I think the arbitration isn't going to scare them too much, because he will sort of be along the lines of what they expect, sort of in that $8 million range. But at the end of the day, Brock Boeser is a player that if he does get traded, he's going to have a lot of value, which is sort of why I put him on this list, because he has been rumored, but at the same time, it's not necessarily likely or guaranteed that they will be trading him, but at the same time, if he does get traded, a lot of value coming back. So when we take a look at a guy like Boeser, obviously there is going to be a yard sale in Vancouver. They're sort of in that middle role, similar to like Dallas, but a little bit worse off. And I think, especially with the moves they made, a lot of players are going to be shipped out. We see 3 on this list already. But with that, Brock Boeser does come in at number 7. And moving on to another Canuck with Connor Garland, valuing it at $4.95 million. 4 years left on his contract, obviously a recent signing. But with a guy like Connor Garland, he's another one where it's not necessarily a guarantee he's going to be moved. He has been rumored to be on the move, but at the same time, they don't have to move him right now. 4 years left on his deal. So the reason why I put him on this list again is because he has been rumored in trade talk, and especially with the yard sale going on out in Vancouver right now, he's not safe, guaranteed not safe, and I would be expecting a trade, but he's not necessarily on the value of some of these other guys. And I think when you take a look at Garland versus Boeser, you obviously rather Boeser, but Garland is more likely to be traded, which is why he's lower on this list. So with that, Connor Garland does fall to number 6, and with that, Ben Chiarot from the Montreal Canadiens is coming in at number 5, $3.5 million, going to be a UFA at the end of the season. And we take a look at Ben Chiarot. A lot of people have him a little bit lower, obviously in that sort of 1, 2, 3 range. But for me, I don't necessarily consider him that high. I think he has got some good D partners out of Montreal, and I think he is going to go for quite a bit. But when we take a look at who else is out there right now, I think there is going to be a lot higher returns coming out. And I think when we take a look at that, the lower picks that I have on this list are going to be a lot more expensive to try and obtain. I think Ben Chiarot is probably going to be a first-round pick. Coming back to Montreal. Obviously, Montreal is another team that's sort of struggled this year. Haven't quite got off to the start they wanted. Had to fire their coach. Got big quads out there with Martin St. Louis. But with that, I think Montreal is going to be in a big sort of seller role at this deadline. And Ben Chiarot is definitely going to be one of those players to go. He is also nearing the end of his contract. Very unlikely to return to Montreal. So I do expect him to be on the move. And with that, Ben Chiarot coming in at number 5. Moving on to number 4 with John Klingberg, 4.25, going to be a UFA at the end of the year. Another player that has shown zero interest to return to Dallas, and I do expect him as another one that is probably a guarantee to be traded. They just got to find the right value coming in back. And he's another one of those Dallas star players on the sort of verge of a playoff spot, but unfortunately just haven't quite cracked the code yet. But at the end of the day, I do expect Klingberg to be traded, mainly because of that UFA status. They want some value coming back, and I think he's going to be the first piece of many to fall from the Dallas Stars. And I look forward to seeing what is going to happen with Dallas. With that, John Klingberg going to be a very high, probably high pick into a sort of that mid-round first and a high prospect. I'm looking forward to seeing what the return is for John Klingberg, because it is going to be quite a bit. With that, John Klingberg does land on number 4 on this list. Moving on to number 3, we have JT Miller, valuing it at $5.25 million. Year left on his contract, but with that, heavily rumored to be in trades. And I do expect a very high return for a guy like JT Miller. He is most likely going to be valued in maybe a first and a high prospect, or sort of that high first and a middle prospect. But at the same time, Vancouver, the dumpster fire out there, I do expect quite a big sell, and I really do expect a whole dumpster fire of a team after this deadline. A lot of players are going to be traded, a lot of youngness coming to the out west. And I think at the end of the day, it's going to be interesting to see what actually transpires, because they do have quite the team there. They just have to sort of put it all together, and unfortunately, I don't think they have the time to do that with just under 2 weeks to go. But with that, JT Miller coming in at number 3 on this list. Finally, number 2 with Tomas Hertl. He does have a 3-team trade clause, so he can only be traded to 3 teams he picks. Coming in at $5.65 million UFA at the end of the year. And unfortunately for Hertl, he's another one where I do expect him to be traded, mainly because of that UFA status. He has been really heavily rumored in trades. But San Jose, sort of on another one of those teams on the verge, and I just don't think they have enough this year to really go for a push. And I think when you take a look at San Jose, at least the trades they've been making, they're really trying to get younger, they're really trying to get better. I think Hertl is sort of that first piece to really fall, that really big piece to fall before the team goes into a full rebuild. So I am looking forward to seeing what the return package on a guy like Hertl would be. It has been rumored to be 2 first-round picks. And I'm looking forward to see what goes on there. Because a lot of teams are really afraid to give up that kind of dough, and especially with the value in at 5.625. He is a first-line center on pretty much any team you look at. You could argue him for a second-line center for some teams that have really solid teams. But with that, Tomas Hertl coming at number 2 on the list. And finally, coming in at number 1 on the list, we have Jacob Chychrun. And this is probably the best player we're going to see traded this year. I'd be interested to see what actually happens, because Chychrun guaranteed pretty much to be traded. The rumors are saying they're traded, but at the same time, they are going to wait it out. They're going to see what kind of return they can get, and if they don't get it this year, they'll try again next year. They have $4.6 million, 3 years left on the deal, and I think when you really look at a guy like Chychrun, you have the term, you have the player, and you have the potential. When you take a look at those 3 things, you have the skill to play, do you have the potential, and do you have basically the age and the contract to go with it. And Chychrun meets all those criteria, so I think he is going to be the highest bidder, at least for this deadline. Of course, there are quite a few non-names on this list, which I am looking forward to seeing if they do get moved. But unfortunately, with that, we have reached the end. This is the final trade bait board. But with that, if you made it this far in the video, thank you for watching. If you like it, drop a like. If you really like, consider subscribing. Tell all your friends and leave a comment down below your thoughts on the NHL trade bait board 2021-2022. Until next time, see ya.